So before we get to our discussion, we're gonna move on to our final speaker in this session, and that's gonna be Rita Hamad from the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine, who will be presenting on the impacts of county-level COVID-19 related public health and social policies on racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic disparities in mental health and healthcare utilization. Rita, the floor is yours.
Great. So I'm so excited to have heard the other two presentations. They all really are very complementary and mesh together and have an interesting narrative all together. Just to get started, here is the lead investigators on our study, myself, and then Mark Pletcher and Christina Mangurian at UCSF, as well as Thomas Carton at the Louisiana Public Health Institute. This is just the overall aims of the grant, which I can't actually remember if we presented them. It's been a while since we presented them to the whole group, but the first aim is the one I'm going to focus on today, which is where we are assessing geographic and temporal variation in county level COVID-related policies nationwide by doing a retrospective policy data collection effort for a sample of about a little over 300 counties. And then when we get to Aims 2 and Aims 3, we're going to estimate the effects of these policies on, first of all, mental health and health behaviors as assessed using national survey data, and then healthcare utilization for mental health problems using claims data and other utilization data sets. So again, just focusing on Aim 1, we've done sort of a kind of a random sample of US counties, slightly targeted to make sure that we capture at least half of the US population, and that we get at least, we get all 50 states and DC. And actually, I can't see my slide. Let me minimize you guys. And also diverse with respect to race, ethnicity, and rural urban status. And we use the CDC Social Vulnerability Index to make sure we were oversampling counties with a higher percentage of vulnerable populations. And we also use probability proportion to size so that we oversample, or not oversample, but just sort of sample proportionate to the size to make sure we get large counties also. Again, we're collecting longitudinal data for all of 2020 and 2021 on a weekly basis. So we'll have sort of granular longitudinal data. I'm going to talk about which policies we're coding in a minute, but they're coded according to their stringency or comprehensiveness. In terms of the sources, we're prioritizing government websites, press releases from governments, but we're also drawing, like, if those are inadequate to figure out what was happening in a given county, we're drawing on other sorts of secondary sources as well, including news sources. And then the policies that we're gathering data on fall in 3 general domains. The first is containment and closure, the second is economic support, and the third is public health measures. And this is the exact policies that we're going to be looking into. So containment and closure policies. I'm not going to read through the whole list. You can look through yourself, but it's a wide range of policies. Economic support are policies that often, as far as we know, haven't really been gathered in as much detail, even in some of those state policy databases out there, like the Oxford COVID Government Response Tracker. And those include housing support, utility support, income support, paid sick leave, and nutrition support. And the idea is that these in particular may be important for issues of equity. And then the public health measures, some of which have been touched on in the other presentations that were just given. So what I'm going to present right now is some preliminary data on a slightly different set of counties. And this was funded by another funder, by PCORI, and it provided the preliminary data to justify the current data collection effort. So for what I'm presenting right now, we collected data on 171 counties from 7 states. And these data were just collected at a single point in time, January to March of 2021, using the methods I just described. And this gives sort of a preliminary look at how common each of the different policies were and how stringent each of the different policies were at this, again, single point in time. So again, if we can just go through a couple of examples. So for school closings, Oh, I should go through the categories first. So in some cases, we couldn't find documentation of any policy. That would be in the first column. Sometimes we found documentation that there were no restrictions. And then if we found that there were restrictions, then we sort of categorized them, one being the least strict. And in some cases, there just wasn't enough variation to have all 4 stringency categories. So maybe there was only 1 or 2 categories of stringency. So in the case of school closings, in the particular sample that we were looking at, the vast majority had some sort of restriction, but they weren't particularly strict or comprehensive. During this period of the pandemic, there was a reasonable amount of workplace closures, but again, not particularly, sort of more in the least strict category. There were a lot of restrictions on private gatherings. And then if you go further down, you'll see that for some policies, there just wasn't a lot of documentation of these policies at this point in the pandemic, or these policies just weren't being used very much, like nursing home policies and curfew requirements. And I should say that in a lot of cases, if there was no documentation of a county policy, we're also collecting data on these same policies at the state level. And in many cases, it was because the state already had sort of a universal policy on this, or a tiered approach or something like that. And so this includes imputation. If the county policy is missing, we would fill in with whatever the relevant state policy is. So that's why in a lot of cases, you see that no policy documented is 0%, because we were able to fill in with a state policy. For this particular phase of data collection, we didn't have the full list of economic response policies. We were only looking at housing and utility support. And we found that in about 76% and 65% of counties, respectively, there was some sort of support provided for housing or utilities. And then when it came to the public health policies that we were looking at this phase in the pandemic, they were, what we would categorize as very comprehensive, widespread public information campaigns, broadly available testing, etc. These are the 7 states that were included. And so what this slide is showing is the geographic variation, both within and across states. So you can see that some states, California, New Jersey, New York, had many counties that had, a higher number of policies implemented at this time in the range of 20 to 22. And then in Texas, Mississippi, and a bit in Louisiana, fewer numbers of policies per county. And if a county is in white, it means it just wasn't collected as part of this data collection effort. Although, and then I should also say, if you look within states as well, for example, in California, you can see that there's a lot of variation within states, and you can see that for Utah as well, where we just happen to collect data on the entire state, that there's broad variation within states as well. This is actually similar to what Shannon was just presenting, because we're also really interested in thinking about how these policies are correlated with one another. And so you can see the dark green is policies that are highly correlated with one another, and they occur at the same time. Red and orange means that they're negatively correlated. That means they often don't occur together, although the strength of the negative associations is all pretty small. So those are weak associations, but there were many that were strongly positively correlated with each other. And it was a lot of sort of the closure type policies of workplaces, of movie theaters, of places of worship, etc. And this gets again to the point of when we're thinking about next steps and analyzing the effects of these policies. It's really important to keep this in mind, because if you might think that you're analyzing the effects of one policy, but really it's correlated with other ones that might be having similar effects, and that might lead to some confounding. I just wanted to present one other preliminary paper that we did, where we really did a deep dive initially into California in particular. And this paper has been published. The work I just presented on has not yet been published, so please don't share any of that. But if you'd like to look up this paper, you're welcome to do so and to share it. Here we were looking at mapping out for the particular time period that we were looking at, going through March 2020 to November of 2021, and capturing a range of policies If you look at the legend down here, COVID-19 mitigation, safety net policies, housing policies, school and childcare. And this was, again, we were sort of working out the details of how to do this data collection for the U01 project. And so it's a list that's much more specific. And we were just sort of gathering data on any type of COVID-related policies that we could find. And we captured these both at the California level, which is the top half of the figure, and corresponding policies at the federal level. And to be honest, I now like cite this paper whenever I'm writing any COVID paper these days, because it really does show how so many policies were rolling out at the same time, at the state level, at the federal level. So if you're trying to analyze any given one of these, it's really important to think about this clustering of these policies as they were being rolled out. So just thinking in terms of next steps, where we're going next will be once the county policy data collection is complete, which we think will be in about a year. We've collected about 100 of the 300 plus counties so far, and we're sort of ramping up hiring more to get more data collectors to speed things up a bit. We'll next be linking those data sets with these survey data sets to look at mental health and health behaviors. And then for AIM3, again, linking it with data sets to examine utilization for mental health more closely. And just to acknowledge the funding, there's this U01, and then as I mentioned, PCORI funded some of that preliminary data collection. I want to acknowledge our data collection team who've been scouring the internet to build out the database, as well as the UCSF and Louisiana Public Health Institute teams. And then we also have our consultants who Julia Rafeman and Thomas Hale have been particularly involved at this stage because they both run their own databases of state and national level policies and have been really informative as we've tried to map that onto how policy data collection looks at the county level. And I think that's it. Thank you.